After living in the city of Yangon for an entire month, our time in Myanmar has come to an end. But before we completely wrap up the Myanmar series, we wanted to make a video that talked about all the things that we learned or didn't expect or that caught us by surprise in regards to Myanmar as a country. And if you've been on the channel for a while, then you know that we like to do this every time we leave a new place. And as per our normal routine, leave your comments of your best guesses of where you think we have gone to after Myanmar, and we will be addressing that in the next video. Surprisingly, when we did this last time, we left Malaysia and came to Myanmar and asked you guys where you thought we were, and there was 0 comments for Myanmar. We got a ton of comments for Thailand and Vietnam and the Philippines. I think that those were the top 3. The only hint that we'll give you for this one is that we are still in Southeast Asia. So let us know in the comments your best guess.
We did do a poll as well, and Myanmar was very low on the list. I think last.
Yeah, so after we asked you guys in our last video, we did a formal poll through YouTube community, and I think that Myanmar was last on the list with only 8% of voters voting for Myanmar. So yeah, let us know what your guess is now. So to start things off, we're going to start with like some just quick quirks, I guess, that stood out to us, that were unique to us about Myanmar, that we couldn't help but notice like right after we got off of the plane. So the first thing is that we got a Grab right off of the plane, which is Southeast Asia Uber equivalent if you're not aware of that. So we got in a Grab, and the first thing we noticed is that in Myanmar, they drive on the right hand side of the road, but also many cars have their steering wheel on the right hand side of the car as well. So, you know, if you drive on the right hand side of the road, then your steering wheel is typically on the left, and vice versa. If you drive on the left hand side of the road, your steering wheel is typically on the right. So that was very interesting to us, but what made it even more strange is that not all cars have that steering wheel configuration. Some cars have it on the left, some cars have it on the right. We have no idea why that is. The only thing that we can think is that maybe because since Myanmar was previously colonized by the British, that at that point in time, people drove on the left side of the road in Myanmar, and so the steering wheel made sense to be on the right hand side. But later, maybe after they gained their independence, they switched to drive on the right hand side of the road, and so some cars left the right hand steering wheel in configuration from previous times. That's just a wild guess. If you're Burmese or if you just happen to know Myanmar history, then let us know why that is. Along the lines of kind of mixing things though, like with the steering wheels and driving, another thing is that the measuring system that is used, you know, in the United States we use the imperial system, and a couple of other countries use that as well, but I think in the most other parts of the world, the metric system is used. But in Myanmar, we saw actually both systems were used. For example, like a scale was measuring weight in pounds in one location, and then in another one, we saw one measuring in kilograms. So the fact that both are used, not sure what that's about. I'm not even sure if one is more heavily used than the other based on what we saw while we were there. So again, if you know this stuff, then leave your comments on this video so that we and other viewers can be more informed as well, because we love to hear from you guys. That's what one of these surprises videos, that's what they're about, is to actually get feedback from you all as well, since a lot of the stuff are things that we just experienced but that we don't actually know the cause behind.
Well, wasn't there one example of them using miles versus kilometers somewhere?
Maybe. I mean, that would make sense.
I'm like thinking like in the car it was giving miles like per hour that you were traveling in terms of your speed instead of kilometers. I remember just seeing miles somewhere and I was like, that's strange.
Yeah, I can't recall for sure, but I just know that we were seeing lots of different mixes of units of measurement all over the place. So
right.
Again, that was really interesting. So all right, again, this is in terms of it being just a melting pot of different configurations for things. Another one is the outlets for plugins on the wall. They accepted, like, I don't know, it was almost like a universal outlet. Some outlets would be like the tip, I don't even know, I know they're called like A, B, C, D, stuff like that, but some would be like the 2 prongs, some would be like the kind that we use in the United States, some would be the kind that are used in like Singapore, Malaysia. They are either A, outlets that are just configured so that really anything can kind of fit into it, any of the types of plugins, or B, like within our single hotel room, we had like 3 different styles of outlets. One like European style, one American style. I mean, it was just like a very different. We haven't seen that anywhere else. I think everywhere else we've been has been one specific type of outlet. But it was cool because you barely ever needed an adapter or a converter for anything, so it was efficient. It worked.
The fact is, from our perspective, Myanmar is an extremely unique place. We encounter things that we've never seen before. It had me like so confused. So 2 surprising things that came right off the bat, and this is mainly based on like media coverage of Myanmar. So in terms of media, what really surprised me like right off the bat when we got there is Myanmar actually is not a war zone. So it's a regular place, specifically in Yangon where we were. There's not like active fighting or conflict happening there. So that's just something to be aware of. If you look at the media that's covering the place, it's going to give you a real kind of perception that's not indicative of what's happening there. Now, there are places where there's conflict going on, but it's not the whole country. So the country has roughly 60 million people there, which is quite a large number, and many of those people have regular lives that aren't filled with conflict on a daily basis. There are businesses there, business owners, people working to day in and day out to support their families, and it's just kind of average day for regular people from that perspective. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, the other thing is that you might hear or think that Myanmar is extremely poor. So the way like the media covers it is like the whole place is just nothing but like poor people. And that's also not the case either from our perspective, especially in Yangon where we stayed for our 30 days. There is a lot of wealth inequality though, and you could really see that when, like for example, when we would walk down the streets, we could see people that appeared to be kind of on the lower end or maybe very poor. And then we'd also have like a very nice like luxury car driving by us, as well as like Inya Lake, which is the lake that we showed called by the name of Love Lake. We were like looking for a place to stay right around there, and we were shocked to see that there was an apartment there that cost $10,000 a month for rent, and we were just like, what? That really kind of confused us because I don't know what kind of job you would have to be able to afford that. So like if you're from Myanmar and you know like what types of industries are in Yangon for, someone, I guess like a business owner could potentially afford it, but yeah, like what kind of job in Yangon would support having an apartment that costs $10,000 a month? I'd really like to know that if you're familiar with it, as well as like owning a Range Rover, for example. We saw a lot of Range Rovers, and actually even more so than Range Rovers, we saw a lot of like high-end Lexus vehicles driving around all over the place. Now on the flip side of that, whenever we first arrived, and this was the case for many of our grabs that we took, the cars would be very old. So like when we first arrived at is it Yangon International Airport? Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we arrived from the airport, we got a grab, and it was a young guy picked us up, and the car was like from the 80s. I think it was like an old Toyota, so it was like still running and everything, but it was like just, I can't really describe it. It was like just old and it kind of smaller. Like they make the cars a lot bigger these days, but it was like smaller. It had like rust on the outside.
It felt like we were in a go-kart.
Yeah, it kind of felt like we were in a go-kart, mainly because I think the wheels were a little bit smaller. And then in the back, and this was the case for many of the grabs that we got in, like there would be no seatbelt, or the seatbelt wouldn't work. So that was something that was interesting, was to be like getting in all these grabs of these very old vehicles and then like seeing these high-end Lexus SUVs driving by. Now, interestingly, on that point is that the drivers would always be wearing their seatbelt. So you kind of felt like there wasn't a symmetry between you and the driver when you're sitting in the back, because you're like trying to put your seatbelt on and it's not working and the driver's like buckled up. But even with that, like I would say that the traffic when we'd be in a grab, the drivers were typically like, you didn't get a sense that they were driving like wildly or anything like that. It was pretty mellow. Like the streets, like we didn't go super fast, and the traffic was relatively mellow. We didn't really feel like super unsafe. Although, I mean, it really doesn't matter. Like if you have a crash, even if you're going like really slow without a seatbelt, it's dangerous. So, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind. If you know like why these, I mean, it was really common. We took probably like 20 grabs, and there was like one that had a seatbelt in the back.
A lot of them, it seemed like the back seat had been replaced, like that it wasn't the original back seat, almost like one large bench seat that had been replaced.
Yeah, so like the cars, well, especially I know in the older cars, they did have like these bench style seats, and a lot of times I would be like digging in there trying to, you know, pull out the seatbelt little buckle or whatever you call it, and I couldn't get it, or if I could get it, then it wouldn't work. So
aside from the first couple of people in the airport that we met, Burmese people, or from our Grab driver, the first Burmese people that we met were in our hotel, and we were lucky to have like such a nice and warm Burmese staff at our hotel. They were very kind. They helped inform us on a lot of things that we didn't know. And one of the first things that we learned is the greeting in Myanmar, the way to say hello in Burmese, or maybe I think it might be even like a little bit more of a warmer welcome than just straight up hello. But the way you say it is Mingalaba, and usually you give a little bow when you do it. And there are some suffixes, I think, that you can add to the end of the word, like for male versus female, but I cannot remember those off of the top of my head. But just little suffixes on the end of Mingalaba. If you're a male and you say it, then there would be some little piece of a word that comes on the end, and there would be a different kind of word that comes on the end if you are a female. So let us know in the comments if you're Burmese. Refresh our memories, please, because we don't remember I said suffix, maybe it's referred to as a postfix, I'm not sure. But if you're Burmese, you know what I'm talking about, so let us know in the comments. Now, I said that there was like a bow included, and in Southeast Asia, and I think in Asia in general, bowing is pretty normalized. So a lot of times when you're greeting someone or saying thank you, but in Myanmar, the bow itself was a lot more pronounced. And it wasn't just like when you were greeting someone. We noticed that like if someone was walking by us, and we picked this up really quickly, like in our hotel, if we would be in the common area working on our laptops or something, and someone from the staff would walk by, they would bow like to go by us. So it wouldn't, it's not just reserved for greetings or thank yous in that case. It's kind of just like, you know, if you're maybe in someone's presence, or I'm not sure. So if there's a specific bowing culture that we didn't fully understand in Myanmar, then let us know that as well. But we did notice that it was just a lot more common than just your typical like hello or thank you that you get in other places. Now, another thing about the people, so I think that everyone that we actually interacted with or had a conversation with in Myanmar was always very friendly, and the interaction always went very well. But we just noticed while walking on the street, every time I'm doing these videos, especially the surprises videos, I'm getting attacked by bugs at the same time.
I think it's just Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Or it's just Earth.
So, what was I saying?
About the people on the street.
Oh yeah, so every time we had interactions with local people, it was always good. Like, we never had any problems with anybody, and everybody was always really friendly that we talked to. But people, we noticed really quickly that, like, when we would go out and just be walking in Yangon, this was even on our first night there, we went out and walked around Inga Lake, we got like a ton of stares, and we weren't sure. Like, we know that Myanmar is less traveled by tourists, but they still have tourists, especially in Yangon. I mean, it's a huge city. So at first we were like, is it because we're sticking out because we look different, or yeah, we weren't sure what it was about. And we didn't have the camera or anything out like on these first few walks, so it's not like that was attracting attention. So yeah, we're unsure what that was about. And it would just be like just kind of blank stares, like not friendly, not angry, just kind of just like staring at us. And something is that the dress in Myanmar is a lot more conservative than especially for women. I mean, just from our experiences, the traditional, I don't know if you would refer to them as a dress that women wear. It's kind of like a two-piece outfit, and they're really beautiful. But you know, they're mostly covered for the most part. So you don't see, or I didn't see, local women wearing tank tops a lot, for example, or shorts. Sometimes I would, but it just seemed like
the shorts would be like not short.
Yeah,
they
not
go
short
down
shorts.
to the knee almost.
Yeah. So it was more conservative, and so like I think maybe the first night that we went out, I was wearing a sleeveless top similar to this or something, and I don't know if anybody thought bad about it or not, but I felt a little bit uncomfortable because I didn't want to stick out from other people. So going forward, most of the times I would be covering my shoulders, and I decided not to wear shorts that often either. So again, let us know, is that I do think that it is true that they're more conservative, but do you get judged if you are showing more skin, like, you know, a sleeveless shirt or something like that? Is that something that you shouldn't do? Is it disrespectful? Please give us some more insight on that as well.
For men, like at first I thought that, because I usually wear a wife beater outside, especially if we're going out to like a nature spot.
You might need to frame, what is a wife beater?
Oh, a wife, ooh, yeah.
It's kind of a negative term.
Yeah, it's like a tank top.
Yeah, a sleeveless shirt for men.
Yeah, not a wife beater.
Yeah.
That's slang. Anyway, I thought that I shouldn't wear that maybe because, and maybe that's why people are staring at us, but then I saw a lot of local men wearing wife beaters, or wearing tank tops.
So yeah, that was just kind of like an additional quirk we hadn't really experienced in other Southeast Asian countries that we have visited so far. We mentioned in an earlier video that we got to Myanmar during their rainy season, and it very much was the rainy season for sure. Like, it would rain, especially during like the first 2 weeks of our stay. It would rain almost nonstop, like morning, noon, and night. And then maybe the last 2 weeks of our stay, it might shower for an hour or two every day, but we were getting a lot more sun, thankfully, because it was just kind of dreary weather. But if you know us, we are suckers for getting caught in Southeast Asia rain by foot. So we did get caught by rain a couple of times, and that was shown, like, I think in our Inga Lake video. And so yeah, and that's been shown in many other videos in other countries as well. But one story that we have to tell in regards to getting drenched is pretty funny. So one night we were walking from our hotel to go eat at pretty much our favorite restaurant that was there, which we may touch on this a little later in the surprises, but it was an Italian restaurant out of all places. It was the best Italian food that we've ever had. Anyways, we were walking to that restaurant to get dinner one night, and it was just barely drizzling, but earlier in the day it had been pouring. So we were prepared, we had our umbrella, and we were just walking casually, and we were on the side of the road, and this huge truck comes and turns, and there is a massive puddle. And I'm sure you can fill in the rest of the story, but the truck hit the puddle, and it was like a movie. Like, it came through and the water just shot all over us. Hair, face, clothes were drenched. It was pretty insane and gross, okay, like, because it was water that had been sitting in this puddle on the street. And we were going to eat dinner, so we walked into this restaurant, which was a pretty nice restaurant, just completely drenched. It was kind of embarrassing and we felt disgusting, but we had to eat. So we learned our lesson. So then from that point forward, we were always very aware of the puddles. We walked further on the sidewalk away from the road, and we would use our umbrella as a shield when there would be cars kind of coming near a puddle that were close to us. So yeah. Something that was completely brand new to us was the idea of chewing betel nut. So if you're Burmese or Southeast Asian in general, then you may already and probably already know what that is, but for us, we had no clue. We mentioned it in our video about the Yangon circular train, but basically it is very popular to chew this. If you're familiar with chewing tobacco, how you chew it and then you end up kind of spitting it out, it's similar to that, but it's a plant. Betel nut is what it's referred to, and it's kind of like wrapped in a leaf with the plant sprinkled in this leaf with, I think, some lime, not lime juice, but some type of lime liquid that is like bundling up the leaves all together. You chew it, and it ends up turning your mouth red, and this deep red spit is just then spat out on the sidewalk. So red and so potent that it actually just like permanently stains the stuff. I don't know if maybe a water pressure, what is that called? A pressure washer might clean it off, but it's kind of like all over the streets. And while we were there, we knew it was popular. We thought that it was maybe some form of chewing tobacco. Found out later what it was, and actually it has kind of like, from what we understand, some type of stimulant effect similar to that of caffeine. And we don't know if you get any highness from it, like, or if it makes you feel any type of certain way, or if it just gives you energy and it's like maybe a coffee substitute. So let us know that if you know, because we don't know, but it was extremely, extremely popular. We've heard that there are some types of talks maybe where the government is trying to put a stop to it just because it is actually really bad for you. It appears that it causes mouth cancer, amongst other adverse health effects. So along with that, also it's kind of littering the streets with this red spit everywhere that kind of just stains all the sidewalks. And so I think that the government is trying to put something in place where it puts an end to this. So let us know the status of that if you are aware.
It's time now to talk about pricing. The pricing in Myanmar in general really shocked us. So like in terms of it being a low-cost place, I would say absolutely. Like there were so many things that were priced relatively low, except for housing. So aside from like being able to actually find a place to stay, especially like if for us, we want to have like our own kitchen and stuff like that where we can cook. And so we don't want to like stay in a hostel, which we're not totally against, but we just haven't gone that route yet. But yeah, unless you're gonna get a hostel or something like that, you're gonna be paying like quite a bit in terms of accommodations. Now, aside from accommodations, most of like the other products, like the grabs, for example, like we were able to get everywhere around the city for like $2, which would be 3,000 kyat. So we were able to go everywhere for about $2, and it was super fast. Like the grabs really shocked us. Like as soon as we would order or put in our like request for grab, it would be like they would show up at our hotel like literally 30 seconds later. So the pricing for grab was great. The pricing for food was also really good, going out and at the grocery store. So in terms of grocery store, this is where we purchase our water, and this was the lowest price we'd ever seen for water. We were able to get like a very large jug. I can't remember, do you remember the size of the jug?
I think it was 5 liters maybe?
5 liters, so it's one of the really big ones, and it was 600 kyat, which is about 33 cent, or is it, yeah, 33 cent for a huge jug of water. So that was like the lowest priced water we'd ever seen. In addition, the alcohol was extremely low cost. This was going out and at the grocery store. So we're gonna talk grocery store prices right now. It was 60 cents per beer. Unbelievable. Like I've never seen that or heard of it. And the beer was, the one that we drank was called Myanmar beer, and it was quite good. Every time we go to the restaurant, the Italian restaurant, if we would get beer, or actually we did get beer there like a few times, and so the waiters, when we come in, they'd always say, Myanmar beer, trying to get us to purchase one. But yeah, so like the beer was just extremely affordable in terms of price. Now, if you went to liquor like whiskey, we were able to, buying like the top shelf stuff that they had, we could get like a bottle of whiskey like about this size. So I can't remember the exact math, but it broke down to be something like 13 cents per a shot. And this stuff was high quality too. It wasn't like some really low quality stuff. So really unbelievable on that pricing
So you talk about
front.
the accommodation, you know, and how we would want a kitchen, but we didn't do that because we couldn't find a place that was good pricing.
So basically, for the hotel that we were in, like, we picked it because it was relatively okay in terms of price, but we couldn't find anything that had a kitchen. So for the entire month that we were in Myanmar, we had to like deal with not being able to cook. We would do like sandwiches and stuff like that. And the big thing was that we had the breakfast downstairs. That was really good. If you saw our Burmese breakfast video, that really saved us. And then that's also why we ate at this Italian place so often, because it was right down the street from our hotel and the pricing was pretty good.
And we could actually find, to clarify, places of that did have kitchens, but either like the location was way out of the way, so it'd take us like a really long time to get anywhere.
Yeah, so bad location
or high price,
or a very high price. So yeah, like in terms of, you know, going to Myanmar and having like, you know, on a budget, it would definitely be a place to go if the housing wasn't so expensive. So if you're Burmese or you're from Myanmar, or you just know about why the pricing is the way it is, let us know on the alcohol front, like how are they getting that low? Because that's like lower than anything we've ever seen. And then also, why is the like housing so expensive? I don't know if any of this stuff is related to like government policies, but I do know that like for the hotel, we had to actually like specify as tourists where we were going to be staying, and it had to be like a registered place. So this pricing issue that we're talking about could just be for tourists. So if you're a local, you know, let us know what's the housing situation for local Myanmar people. Like, is it or for local people in Myanmar, do you typically like own your land, or is it like a lot of times passed down? Like how does that work, and what's the pricing like? So we are back now, and we took a break because, as you've seen in the past, or typically what seems to be developing as a pattern, is that these surprises videos, they get really long because apparently being new travelers as we are, so many things surprise us. So it got dark. Like, we start and it's daylight and then it gets dark. And this being Southeast Asia, when it gets dark, the mosquitoes come out like crazy. So we had to go in and get the bug spray, and then, I don't know, can you see my clothes well? It's apparent that I'm wearing a hoodie. Okay, so yeah, it's hot out here, but we're like, screw it, forget the bug spray, these mosquitoes are serious. So we're just like fully clothed now. Fun fact is that we figured out that if you're wearing like tight pants, depending on the material, a mosquito can easily just bite right through that. I guess because their little needle thing can just like stick through the cloth. But anyways, we're here. We're gonna continue with these Myanmar surprises in the nighttime, or these are Myanmar surprises at night. So I'm going to kick it over to Mandy, who's gonna continue giving you the lowdown on our experience in Myanmar.
Am I in focus?
Yes.
Okay. So we are going to pick back up now that we're probably going to sweat like a ton because we're in hoodies, but we're double packing mosquito repellent and long clothing. We traded our shorts for pants and our tank tops for hoodies. Additionally, we were quite parched, so we decided to get a drink.
Here, have a drink.
We started drinking these in Malaysia. I saw like everyone in Singapore and in Malaysia would be drinking these drinks all the time, and I don't think that I mentioned them in any of the Malaysia videos, but it's called 100 Plus, and it tastes like a carbonated Gatorade. It's actually really good.
I'll enjoy this.
Yep.
Wow, you vlog.
All right, well, that's a perfect segue because the next thing that we were going to talk about is food in Myanmar. So, now if you saw our...
Oh, sorry, can you open this for me? I can't get it open and hold the camera. Thanks.
So in regards to food, if you saw our previous video on Burmese style breakfast, we ate that every morning for 1 month. We had mohinga, we had shan noodle, we had chicken noodle soup, Burmese style, we had coconut chicken noodle soup. We had so much stuff, and several dishes I don't even remember, like the fried noodles, Burmese style. Like, we had a lot of stuff. It was so good. So we had Burmese food every morning for breakfast, and then we would go out for our meals almost every night because, like Chris mentioned, we didn't have a kitchen because we were staying in a hotel. So sometimes we would go to the grocery store in Myanmar Plaza and get like salads or sandwiches or something if we didn't feel like going out that night. But other times we would go to, like we mentioned, the Italian restaurant all the time. That was really nearby. That place was so good, and there were several other restaurants that we tried. But that's kind of what our food situation was.
The Italian place was like a safe haven.
Yeah, the Italian place.
For us to get like familiar food.
I mean, they even had like cheeseburgers. That place was really good. And so yeah, to work off all that food, given that we still ate pretty decently in terms of having balanced nutritional food, but for working out while we were there, we used the calisthenic parks that we showed at Enya Lake, and we also used the walking and running paths as well. So if you guys know, we like love working out outside, and something that we've just been blown away by, like in all the places that we visit, it seems they all in Southeast Asia have these calisthenic parks that are just out and abundantly available for anybody who wants to use them. So that is what we used in Myanmar as well. They had everything that we needed, pull-up bars, I don't know what the other bars are called, where you can lift yourself up and do like tricep dips or abdominal exercises. They had a lot of stuff. So that is what we used for that. So that was a great surprise because we didn't know that those calisthenic parks would be so closely located to our hotel. It was only like a 5-minute walk, and we could get to the lake, we could get to the hotel. So that was a really good thing about our particular location. So speaking of parks and the calisthenic parks and things of that nature, we had done previous videos that you might have seen on Enya Lake and Kandoji Lake, and all the parks that we went to, including those two, they would all have these signs, which we showed some of in those videos, but of like things that you shouldn't do at the park. So it was like kind of park rules, a list of things that you shouldn't do, and they would always have these like accompanying illustrations. So for example, it would be like no loud music, no selling of drugs, no picking the fruits from the trees, and then every sign would always include no sex, and it would show like a guy and a female just kind of like in a make-out silhouette with a cross through it, like don't do this. So that was pretty hilarious. So it made us think was having sex in parks like a thing that was common, that it was needed to put a sign to not do that for, or what, because we've never seen that before. And the first time we did, we thought maybe it was just that particular park that we were at the time, and then we realized that it's every park, no sex. So keep that in mind if you visit a park in Myanmar.
Yeah, that's a big downside to Myanmar, is you can't really do what you want to do in the parks.
What? Oh my god. So
Number one complaint.
So another thing that was a bit interesting is that in like Malaysia and in Singapore, late night culture was like a big deal. Like places stayed open super late into the next morning. People were out on the streets until all times of the night, regardless if it's weekend or weekday. But in Myanmar and Yangon, where we were at least, that was not the case. So like everywhere was closing early. Like the latest places would only be open until like 10 p.m. But we were a little on the outskirts of downtown Yangon, so we had heard that 19th Street was a really popular place to go out and drink and to have a night out. I'm not sure how late into the night that goes, but I think it's even referred to as like drinking street. There's like lots of bars and restaurants down that, so maybe the culture is a little different there, but we didn't ever go there at night and experience 19th Street for ourselves for all that it is. So maybe this is just secluded to kind of the, like I said, we were around the Inya Lake area, which is on the outskirts of downtown Yangon. So maybe more on the inside, it might be a little bit more vibrant nightlife than what we witnessed while we were there. But something we did observe is that there was construction going on nearby us. I think that the shopping center that was being built, it's like very close to Myanmar Plaza, called maybe the Central or Myanmar Central or Yangon Central, something like that. But these construction workers would work 24 hours around the clock. Ironically, you may be able to hear some construction going on right now in the background where we're at currently. But yeah, that was...
Well, we don't know if they were doing shifts, but they had workers there 24 hours.
Yeah, there would be workers 24 hours. They would be up on top of this kind of like skyscraper building working even during storms. So I'm not sure how safe that was, but these guys didn't stop. They didn't appear to get breaks even when the weather would turn bad, and they worked all through the night as well. So that was kind of new to us.
Yeah, we knew it because we stay up late, and then also like it was close enough to where we could hear the construction going on.
Well, with that also, since we didn't witness late night, we did witness early morning, and that's because like the breakfast at our hotel that was included in our nightly price was served between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and we are definitely not early birds like ever. We never have been. So waking up at to reach the 9 a.m. cutoff was difficult for us, but we did it the entire month. I think we only missed one morning. We decided to just sleep in, and that was it. So early morning, but not so much late night, people.
That was one of the first times in years that we've gotten up that early, that consistently.
Yeah, because we'll wake up early like every once in a while for something that we have to do like immediately. Even when we were working at our corporate jobs, like we typically, our shifts wouldn't start until like 10 a.m. or something like that. So we are not morning people. We just never have been. Now, the remaining things I think are probably just going to be kind of like random surprises. So like no typical direction or connection between any of these things. But in Yangon, one thing that was really popular in terms of a means of transportation were these bicycle taxis. So there would be these guys driving bicycles with a little cart that was attached to them, and then you could hail one, or you could go up to one on the side of the street and tell them that you needed a ride, and then you would just hop on this little seat on the side of their bicycle, and then they would pedal and get you where you were going. And that was a common way to get from one place to the other. Now for us, we always prefer to walk when we can, and so we walked just like kind of everywhere around our surrounding radius, or the radius surrounding our hotel. And then anytime we were going further away, we would use Grab all the time. And Grab was just so efficient and timely and practical and affordable. So it's great.
Yeah, if you're gonna travel to Yangon, do not worry about transportation, because the Grab system there is so efficient and very cost effective as well. So definitely not something you need to worry about, like how you're gonna get around. It really kind of blows my mind. The new technology makes it so, I guess, easier or more easy to travel than like 20 years ago. I can't imagine like the concerns and having to book taxis and things, or show up in some place and not know like how to get around. So yeah, it's just really easy now, and that was a huge surprise at like how fast and efficient Grab was there. I mean, it was just like snap your fingers and you had transportation. So very good.
Now, I did have one thing that I just had to say, and this is not specific to Myanmar, but this is the first time that I've remembered to say it on the vlog, and it's about taxis. So this has happened in Bali and in Malaysia and in Myanmar. So Chris, I guess on the street, just is a very friendly person to strangers, and will just kind of talk to anybody and wave to anyone or smile at them, acknowledge them, whatever. And so almost every place that we've been, you know, taxi drivers, like, might be in their car, or they might be standing outside of their car, and they'll like put their hands out to ask, like, you know, you need a taxi. And Chris always thinks that they're waving to him, like just saying hello, and so Chris will go hello back or whatever, you know. And so as if signaling, like they're thinking that he is suggesting that he needs a ride. And so then they start getting prepped like they're about to give us a ride, and I'm like, Chris, they're not just friendly, like waving to you, saying hello on the street. They're trying to get you like a ride, and then when you raise your hand and do that, that signals to them that you need a ride. And so all the times it's mostly been fine, just funny as a bystander, like for myself to watch Chris go through that struggle. But one time in Kuala Lumpur, we were walking, and this guy, it wasn't even clear that he was a taxi driver. He was sitting like in a coffee shop, an outdoor coffee shop, and he was sitting there, and his taxi was parked to the side, and we were just walking by, and he kind of like waved across the street, did this little number to be like, you know, you need a taxi. And we were across the street, and Chris waved back like that, and so the guy kind of hurriedly like gets up from his table and goes to his taxi. I'm like, Chris, you know that you just signaled to him that we need a ride. And he's like, oh, I just thought he was waving at me. I'm like, why would he be waving at you?
But what does this have to do with Myanmar?
It just has to do, because you did it in Myanmar as well.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, when taxis would drive by, a couple of times they would like put their hand up, and you would think that they were waving, but really they were just...
I don't think so. Look, in Myanmar, they blew their horn at you.
Yeah, but they also, if they were kind of parked in a stagnant place, they would like kind of put their hand up to signal you. Long story short, Chris has that problem, and he just thinks that all the taxi drivers are super friendly.
I have to disagree. Yes, I will admit that this happened, but I don't think it happened in Myanmar. One of the things in Myanmar that's a little bit different, like I don't remember seeing taxi drivers like waving at you. They would always be, oh no, okay, now the guys on the bikes, the bike taxis, when they would drive by, they would kind of like look at you, and sometimes they wave from a distance, and maybe that's when I did it. But I'm getting better at not like responding by waving back. Always shake my head no now.
But you're right that they mostly honk to get your attention in Myanmar.
Yeah, so definitely in Myanmar you're gonna hear like tons of horns out when you're especially when you're walking on the street. And what we found is that taxis, like, they use that as a technique to like signal that they're there. So yeah, like if you hear somebody like toot their horn at you, it's basically probably a taxi saying like, hey, I'm over here, do you need me? And that's about as far as it goes, unless you throw your hand up like I do when I wave. They're not going to stop, they're going to keep going.
And then maybe it kind of goes hand in hand to talk about the people at night sitting in their cars with the AC running.
People at night. Oh, well no, this wasn't just at night, this was all the time.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, like there were a lot of people, like, because we walked to the grocery store, right, just like we always do, and there was like this one street in particular, but we saw this on many streets, unless like where the cars would be parked on the side. But basically we'd see a car and there'd be someone in it, and the car would be running, and we noticed this like quite a bit. And then finally, after like however long it was of walking past cars like this, we noticed that a lot of times that people would be in their car asleep. So it was like car running, they're inside asleep. So that seemed to be like pretty common. So I'm not sure like why people are doing that, obviously to like stay out of the heat, but I would be concerned about like the price of gas, and thinking that I was gonna like, use up a lot of gas keeping my car running. So if you're from Myanmar and you know what I'm talking about, then let us know, like I guess specifically, like, is this something that actually is common, or is it just like in our area, something that we saw there? And then also, like, is it really cheap? Like, what's the gas prices, or what are gas prices like? Okay, back to Mandy.
Yeah, so something earlier that we were talking about is the affordability of things in Myanmar, and something that was super affordable was the SIM card that we got when we got to the airport. To get a SIM card, I think I just got like 3 gigabytes to start that would last for 30 days, and it was the equivalent of like maybe $2 or $3 for the entire month, and that just blew my mind. Like, it had an associated phone number. It wasn't just a data package, it had a phone number to make local calls, and it had the data package of 3 gigabytes for 30 days, and then you could reload that as well. So that, I think, was the most affordable SIM card that we have purchased since we've been traveling. Other places have been decent, like Malaysia was pretty good, and Singapore was actually surprisingly decent as well, but this definitely was the best priced SIM card so far. So another thing that was super affordable.
We used Telnor, right?
Telenor was the phone company that we used. Yeah, I'm surprised you remember that, because I couldn't. But speaking of, okay, so I think that the price for that was 4,500 Chet. So that this is leading into an example of the pronunciation of things in Burmese. Now, they have their own Burmese alphabet, or I'm not sure if it's referred to as the Burmese alphabet. It's their own alphabet.
Burmese character set.
Yeah, Burmese character set, apparently. But it's not, we're not able to read it or to make out anything. It doesn't look anything like the alphabet that we use for English. And so whenever something is translated, like if you use Google Translate, then Translate will give you the spelling of the Burmese word with the same alphabet that's used for English. So Chet, for example, is spelled Kyat. So you would think like Kyat or Kiat. And so, but the reason that it's pronounced Chet is because in Burmese, the KY makes a ch noise, like the CH does in English. So there were several words that were like that, to where when we would see the way that they were spelled and we would try to say them, we would just completely butcher the pronunciation, because many letters are pronounced differently than the way that we're used to pronouncing them in English. So the language barrier for us to try to say anything in Burmese was really tough. We mastered Mengalaba, but that is, I think, to the extent of which we learned the language. It was pretty difficult. With that though, so we've had to use Google Translate like pretty much everywhere we go to on certain occasions. But the thing about Myanmar is that while we were there, for whatever reason, Google Translate didn't work very well. Like, we used it a couple times to communicate with people who either had very limited English or no English at all, and it just was not working very well. Like, the translation was not what we'd expect it to be, and also the ability to take photos of a Burmese word, for example, and have Google translate it to the English equivalent, because that's something that we've used, is the photo capability of Google Translate. It did not work well at all for Burmese to English either. So,
but one thing I would say about that is that it was often handwritten, like on a sign when we tried it. We didn't try anything that was like typed out.
Yeah, that's true. So a lot of times when we would try to use the photo capability in Google Translate, the photos that we would take would be like of a sign that had handwritten Burmese on it, and Google Translate would just like not know what it was, and they wouldn't even try. They would just say can't detect any Burmese or something like that. So that happened to us several times. and also just like actually typing in an English sentence and translating it to Burmese didn't appear to translate in the way that we intended it to, because a lot of times the Burmese people would have no idea like what we were trying to get at with the translation. Now, switching gears a little bit, if you've watched our videos and you've seen any of the locals in them, then you will have probably noticed some type of, it almost looks like paint on their face, or maybe some type of makeup. That is tonica, and basically it is like a tree bark that gets grinded up on a stone and then mixed with water to make this kind of paste, for which they put on their face and sometimes on their arms as well. And it's supposed to have all of these benefits, like be a natural mosquito repellent and natural sunblock, and also have like moisturizing and anti-aging properties as well. So lots of locals wear that, men and women alike. And I think that maybe depending on the way that you apply it, it can sometimes be like a little bit of a fashion statement, because some people just kind of have it smeared, and then other people, you know, kind of do specific shapes that are like well outlined and kind of make it look like a almost kind of tribal makeup or something. So that was pretty neat, and we wanted to try it, but I don't know, I think maybe it slipped our minds, or
we didn't really get a good opportunity.
Yeah, because when we were there, it stuck out to us like immediately, and so we were curious about it, but then we became so used to it just by the vast amounts of people that we'd see everywhere wearing it, that we just became really used to it. And I think that we both like kind of forgot about wanting to try it, and as well didn't really have like a great opportunity to ask a local to try it out. In regards to their fashion, like we mentioned their clothing earlier, I mentioned women's clothing specifically, but the men a lot of times wear what's referred to as a longi is the word. I might be mispronouncing it a bit, but it's basically like a long fabric that you wrap around kind of in a skirt style fashion, and then you tie it right at the waist in the center. And men wear these a lot of times, and I think we've seen similar things in Bali and maybe a little bit in Malaysia as well, but they are referred to differently. I think sarong, is that what it was referred to in Bali? Sarong. And then a longi here, or not here, we're not in Myanmar anymore, a longi in Myanmar.
Okay, there are 3 things that I want to tell you about, and those 3 things are geckos, power outages, and compliments from men. So let me see if I can do this. First thing is geckos. So interestingly, in Southeast Asia, there's been geckos everywhere, all over the place, and they come out at night typically, and they'll be on the walls, on the signs. Like, we see them everywhere, and we love geckos, so it's all good. But this time in Myanmar was we got a little bit close with a family of geckos, and this is because there was a family of them living in our hotel room. Like, literally, I think they lived like in the curtains or something.
In our specific unit.
Yes, in the unit, which we love them in there because we figured that anytime a mosquito gets in, the gecko, well, speak of the devil, a mosquito just came through. Anytime a mosquito would come in, we think like the geckos are going to help us like deal with this problem, right? So anyways, being this close with a family of geckos is how we were able to discover that geckos chirp. They make this loud chirping sound, which we actually have geckos here, and we just heard one chirp just a minute ago, so I wish that it would happen again. I don't think it's gonna happen. If it does, then I would really freak out. But anyways, they chirp, they make this chirping sound, and we've like always heard this sound for the longest time, and we never knew that it was a gecko until it happened like inside of our hotel room. And then we were like, okay, that was the sound of a gecko, because we saw the gecko and we could hear the sound coming from like looking at the gecko. And so it was like really cool. And now we hear these sounds all the time. And yeah, geckos are everywhere, especially in Southeast Asia, or particularly in Southeast Asia. Yeah, so that was in our hotel room. Now, another thing that happened in our hotel room, or at our hotel more generally, would be power outages. We had power outages, like, I would say the frequency of power outages would be like not once a day, maybe like 5 times a week. So every other day we'd have a power outage. Luckily though, our hotel had this like massive generator, which I've never personally even seen a generator this large. It was like the size of a vehicle. And yeah, like as soon as the power would go out, it'd literally be like 15 seconds later. Typically we'd hear like the power would go out, we'd hear the door open downstairs because the staff of the hotel would be like going outside to turn the generator on. We wouldn't have power for like say 30 seconds and then it'd be kicked back in. So that's something like if you're going to travel to Myanmar, then you should check to see if the place you're going to be staying at actually has a generator. Okay, so we talked about the geckos, we talked about the power outages. So then the number 3 is the compliments from many times local Burmese men on my haircut. So we'd be walking down the street and I would hear like somebody be like, hey, and then they would like point to my hair like this and then they go thumbs up like that. And this happened probably, I would say like, I mean, it was like numerous times. So what would you say, like 4 or 5?
4 or 5 times.
Yeah, 4 or 5 times.
But they'd go out of their way to tell you that they liked your haircut, so that was cool.
So let us know in the comments if this particular hairstyle, short on the, which I actually have like a little bit more right here now, but like short on the sides, it'd be like buzzed, and then like long on the top. Is that like a Burmese style, like that's in right now, or what? All right, now this one right here, I'm gonna try my best to explain this, but I don't actually know what was being said, so it's gonna be maybe hard for me to explain, but we saw this quite a bit, and let us know if this is something. So like many of the parking spaces, particularly at our hotel and then like at restaurants we go to, it would be like the spacing for the parking lot would be really tight. So they would always have somebody like outside, like directing the traffic or helping people park or helping. And this is the thing that was kind of funny. Typically when people would be leaving the restaurant or the hotel, there would always be this guy outside who would be like directing the car, and they would always do it in the same way no matter where we were. Like all the different restaurants we went to, like temples, our hotel, they all were like very loud, and like they'd stand at the back of the car and they'd be making these motions, which that's normal, right? Like everybody's like, you know, directing traffic that way, but they would always say the same thing, and it would be like, when we first heard it, we were like, what the heck is going on? Like, because it sounds like so serious, but they're like, and I know that's not what they're saying. Like, I can't pronounce it.
Say the English equivalent of what you think that
okay,
so
saying. Tell me what they're probably saying.
And
but
I think
like,
we actually have a recording of just the audio that we could possibly
maybe, like, I wanted to get this on recording because it was hard to hear like exactly the pronunciation, but I would imagine it being like back, like, so come back, or good, something like that, like move. And it always just was like so loud, and like it just sounded way more serious than what it was, and it was pretty funny. But yeah, let us know, like, is that like a common thing? Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Or if you're a local, do you know what I'm talking about? Or if you've traveled there, do you know? So just let us know.
All right, so this was kind of a new experience for us, which was the fact that we mentioned this in the video on the grocery shopping, but the fact that we were told kind of multiple times that we couldn't film in places. So on several different occasions when we would have the camera, some places we would not expect to be told, like we would be, in hindsight, we're kind of not surprised about being in Myanmar Plaza being told not to film there. But other areas we were kind of shocked, but multiple times we'd have security guards come up and tell us no filming allowed, or we're not allowed to film, and we even were told we could film with our phone but not with a large camera. So we're unsure what, like, if there's negative stigma associated with filming in Myanmar, or if maybe like we were looked at and maybe thought to be the press or reporters or something like that. So we're not sure. So if you have any insight on why that may be the case, because we haven't experienced that in any other place, and it would have been different if it was only one place. We would just think,
well,
oh, like
name the places where it happened.
So it happened at Myanmar Plaza, and it happened at Yangon University after we were almost already finished, or after we were already almost finished filming. We were like kind of up close to the entrance of the school where there were lots of security guards around, and so they told us there that we couldn't film. And then we, at the Italian restaurant that we mentioned several times, we're going to do like a food review to say like, look at this awesome Italian food that you can get here in Yangon. And we actually kind of like came to know the staff there because we had eaten there so many times, and towards the end of our trip we asked if we could film, and they asked who I'm assuming is the boss there, and he said no. So yeah, multiple times just filming was not really acceptable, it seems like. So we'd love to hear some insight on that, if you happen to know if there's any particular reason, or if we could have been mistaken to be reporters, or yeah, we're just not sure. It was new to us.
Yeah, the restaurant, like, that pained my heart. That like hurt me, because like I really loved that restaurant and we ate there so many times.
And we wanted to basically share it and like, you know, show, I mean, obviously you're going to get really good Burmese food in Myanmar. It's obvious because that is their specialty and that's where it originates. But to have something like Italian, you would just expect maybe to get something subpar. But this place was so good, and so we were just like excited to share it, and we thought it was going to be no problem, but apparently it was. But when we filmed the breakfast, for example, at our hotel, we asked the staff at the hotel, and they were completely open to that, and they had no problem at all with us filming there. So yeah, we're not sure about the inconsistencies there. So yeah, if you have any info, then let us know. So when we started traveling in Southeast Asia, something that we heard very often by people on YouTube or just forums that we would read is the slow internet on this side of the world. And we hadn't really experienced much slowness, like nothing that was really a huge hindrance. But I would say in Myanmar that it was probably the slowest internet that we've had so far. But even so, it was still usable. So like, for example, I could still watch Netflix with no problem. But when it came to like uploading, when we would upload our videos there, we would let it go for like 24 hours. It would take to upload a video that may otherwise, like with faster internet speed, take what, like maybe 2 hours, you think?
Yeah, an hour, 2 hours.
An hour to 2 hours. And on more than one occasion, probably 3 or 4 videos that we uploaded while we were there, it took like 24 hours. So that was kind of new to us. And then like if I tried to watch an American show, that I would need to like browse to an American website like NBC or something like that. I would need to get on a VPN first to be able to get there, and those shows just like absolutely would not play. So Netflix is doing something right apparently.
Yeah,
and Netflix is available in Myanmar, in case you were wondering.
Videos like on YouTube, like 4K was not
yeah, you couldn't play anything in 4K.
It basically wouldn't play.
And then additionally, this is a completely unrelated tangent to the last thing, but so in the video where we introduced the fact that we were in Myanmar, we said that Myanmar was previously known as Burma, and lots of people are aware of that, and Yangon was previously known as Rangoon. But what we came to realize is that actually it's not necessarily previously known as that. Some places still refer to Myanmar as Burma or Rangoon as Yangon. And so the reason why is because we realized that certain places don't, what did we see? They don't recognize the name change?
Well, specifically, it was the U.S. consulate. When we called them to get some information on overstaying visa,
yeah. So
their automated recording was like Rangoon and Burma. And
yeah,
we were like, wow, that's just old or something.
Yeah, we basically had called the U.S. Embassy to ask details about the policy for overstaying the visa, the tourist visa, because we couldn't find anything from Myanmar's like government website. And we saw that the U.S. Embassy referred to Myanmar as Burma and referred to Yangon as Rangoon. And so we were like, is this just really outdated or what? And then we came to realize after the fact that the United States government doesn't recognize the name change. And I think it's a pretty political thing and intertwined. Like, I think the name change had to do with the military in Myanmar, but we are not history majors on Myanmar history, or we don't know the.
Just tell us in the comments.
Yeah, tell us in the comments why that might be certain places not recognizing the newer names for the country or for the city.
And then also, as a local, what is your view on
Yeah,
it?
so if
Do
you are
say
local,
Burma or Rangoon?
yeah, so if you're a local, then how do you refer to Myanmar? Do you call it Burma, or do you call it Myanmar? Do you call it Yangon, Rangoon, or what? Would just be interested to hear if there's any type of like consistency amongst people locally for that. But mentioning the visa overstay, that is something that was interesting. So the policy for a tourist visa is 28 days, and we had read on forums online that you could overstay your visa, I think, for like $3 a day, and basically you would just overstay it without having to do anything besides getting your 28-day tourist visa. And then when you got to the airport to leave, when they saw how many days you overstayed, you would get charged a fee of, I think it was $3 per day. And so that seemed fine, but the fine print of that is that it's against the law to overstay your visa. So we wanted to make sure that that was like a legit policy and not just speculative. So we looked on Myanmar's like tourist websites and visa websites, stuff like that. We couldn't find anything that said that there was any type of overstay policy in place. And so then we called the U.S. Embassy and spoke with them, and they pretty much said, it's against the law to overstay as a tourist, and you're breaking Myanmar law, and if you do that. But they said that they had heard from many other American tourists that that people were previously able to stay and pay a $3 per day fine. All right, so our battery is dying, so we have to end this quickly. To finish up what I was saying, we were too uncomfortable to try to risk overstaying. So if you have information on that, then let us know. It was just interesting that there was nothing actually officially stated online for that. But with that, as we mentioned, the battery is dying and it just cut off on us, so we're going to wrap this up. So please comment anything regarding anything that we talked about in the comments, and we will be revealing our next location in the next video, so we'll see you there.
We've got a lot of dogs coming around this corner. Where?
Yeah, there are a lot of stray dogs all around Yangon, and in this particular place, it's right next to this park that we passed through to go to Myanmar Plaza, and there's always this same crew of like 10 dogs just chilling on this corner. So
yeah, they hang out and they don't really seem aggressive or anything. They're more they get startled when people come by.